The most popular answer of what people want in news is accurate, unbiased news. But the where to get it depends.
Presented by Sacramento Educational Cable Consortium. You're listening to Lights, Camera, Learn. Welcome to Lights, Camera, Learn. My name is Aaron Heinrich, and I'll be your host. And our guest today is Professor Carmen Stitt, a communication professor at Sacramento State. Welcome, Carmen.
Thank you for
Appreciate you being
having
here. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this whole field of communication.
My path to academia was a circuitous path. Graduated from the University of Pittsburgh and then did the proverbial backpacking for a summer and worked several different kinds of jobs over 12 years. I worked at a community organization in Sacramento in Yolo County.
I'm sorry, and what organization was that?
Vocational Training and Employment.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit organization where we helped people with disabilities get jobs in the community. I worked there for 6 years. It was a small organization, and I did a lot hands-on. Really ramped up quickly. Following that, I worked for the County of Sacramento looking at outcomes in mental health for several years, and then followed my husband to Arizona for his graduate school. And there I worked for a couple of years on a grant project looking at outcomes, and then quickly realized that I needed more and talked to my supervisor advisor at the time, and I looked at academic programs at the University of Arizona. Interviewed with communication, didn't know much about communication. It was not my major. I was a psychology undergrad, and really felt a good fit with the chair and the advisor, and that's how I got into it.
Okay. So then, how did you get to Sac State then?
After my graduate program, I went out on the market, and I was fortunate enough to have Sac State as an opportunity for an interview, and they offered me the position, and I happily accepted it coming back to Sacramento.
That's great. I'm sure everybody's glad to have you back here too. So what are some of the classes that you're teaching now?
I teach media communication, health communication, and quantitative research methods for communication studies majors and public relations majors.
Okay. And then of those classes, which do you find students gravitate more toward, or do you feel like they're most involved and engaged in?
Media.
Yeah.
Communication.
Yeah.
It's a very broad topic. My background is media effects, so learning, behavior, beliefs, attitude, opinions from media, whether we're actively searching it out online through social media or searches, or more passively through entertainment media and podcasts where we're listening and watching. And students are engaged in all kinds of media, and they want to learn more about it. And the class teaches what I would call traditional media effects, but of course, over the last 20 years, media has changed radically. So we use a different approach to teaching it, such that it's a platform approach, and students easily are attracted to that because they want to see how it applies to their day-to-day life. There's the theory part, the more academic background, and then there's also the part about what do we know from research. And I really encourage students to embrace the connection between the two. How do they use media, and how do they see the theories and what we know from research? Now that they've learned that, what does the impact in their day-to-day life?
So when you started teaching this media element 20 years ago, how have you seen that change? Obviously the platforms, there's more of them, but anything else that's kind of a through line with some of that? Or
social media was probably the biggest change in the early 2000s, and then apps and different social media platforms, and now AI. So we no longer have only algorithms, the script, guiding what we see, read, and listen to, but also it's an ongoing dynamic change in what that script is.
So with regard to that, because of the ongoing dynamics, and it feels I think to me and to lots of other folks, this is continuing to happen fast. The changes are happening quickly. So how do you work with your students to try to help them navigate that?
Great question. I approach it in such a way that you are no longer the expert, the sole expert. It is a continual uphill challenge to keep on top of things and keep on top of the literature and the latest research. And the emphasis shifts to what we know to how we know things. So being more critical consumers of media, more knowledgeable about the infrastructure and the background workings, rather than just what we see, read, and hear.
So that gets a little bit into media literacy, right?
Absolutely.
So with regard to that, I mean, we work with a lot of media educators all the way from kindergarten through high school. And I think to some extent that media literacy is about how media works, but not how media impacts. So how would you kind of characterize your approach to teaching the impact part of that?
I draw a lot from what we would call traditional media theory, cultivation effects, looking at, large direct impacts of watching a movie or television program. Well, all of that is, blown up in terms of the format because it's very fragmented. You can watch it on demand. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater because we still stream programs. We still watch movies together. It's just a different format. And I do teach the original or the traditional media theories and challenge the students after discussing the platform elements and processes, how and what has changed with the platformization of media. And along with that, as you said, media literacy is part of the equation.
So when we talk about media literacy, how would you characterize that, and what do you think goes into helping people become more media literate?
It's a hierarchical approach such that there are some basic skills, which I'm sure you do teaching with younger students, learning to identify different types of media, advertisements versus educational content versus entertainment, to learning who has control and the power to produce those messages, to more of an experiential learning and understanding, which involves role taking, to know what it is involved in creating those messages and how it might impact and receive different audience members.
So when you're teaching this, then what are some of the things you do in the class to teach the students that you work with at a college level? Anything related to that?
So it involves a number of different things, and that is traditional lecture, but much also it includes. So it includes traditional lecture. It includes discussions with peers where they're bringing in everyday examples, and they are tasked with critiquing, identifying their skills, their challenges, their gaps in knowledge. And it also involves having students choose and identify media problems, lack of representation in media, certain people not being served via media, other people having exacerbated effects, who gets to produce those messages, especially if it's certain groups and not others. So we try to take a holistic perspective. It's no longer lecture, and maybe a discussion on Friday. We break it up. We have students bring their day-to-day usage into the classroom, and I find that experiential learning is, even if it's in a classroom, tends to be the most powerful, because when students are discussing it, writing about it, hearing other people's perspectives, which can be radically different from their own, that is the biggest game changer for them.
So when you're doing this and these students are going through these different exercises, do you notice any particular aha moments that any of the students have, and what would that look like? And it may not be that evident, too.
I do. I certainly see it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of the number of students in the classes. I I can't say that there's any one aha moment other than when they start to grapple with it on their own is when it presents the biggest opportunity for change. It's the dialogue. I see less of an opportunity if it's just the lecture coming at the students. Instead, it's much more involved and them trying to make sense of it in their own schema.
Right. You know, and Sac State represents a pretty diverse student population. So how does that impact, maybe not the way you're teaching, but certainly what the students are bringing into the classroom?
That is the best part about Sac State, in that we have so many different perspectives, so many different backgrounds, and that is the beauty that you see in the classroom, because I try to set up an environment where students feel safe and comfortable to discuss what can be very controversial and sensitive topics. And I think that those are some of the biggest learning moments. You had asked about that before.
Sure.
And it's those being willing to be vulnerable and to share opinions and not hold back are some of the biggest aha moments.
So how do you create a classroom where people feel like they can be vulnerable like that and not be too called out or put down or feel like they can't?
Sure. I have been a professor at Sac State for 17 years, and my personal experience is living it. That is, students want to know, they want to know a little bit about who you are. Not too much, but they want to know that you live what you're teaching. So if it's a safe place, they want to see you be vulnerable, make mistakes, put things out there, and if it's a forgiving environment, it's flexible, it's something that can change. And I think leading that way, if you will, and also allowing students to do the same makes all the difference. And you can say it, but it takes several weeks until students see it, and then there's trust built so that they understand, I think. That's been my observation, that they feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you have, I would think that you also have students that take longer to get there. And then how do you bring them along? Are you just patient and let them find their way?
There's a range, as we all, with all of us, there's a range of learning styles and learning speeds. It's a balancing act. As an instructor in the classroom, it's a balancing act. I want everybody to be included. So people who take longer, people who are way ahead. I don't want the person who are way ahead to feel bored and left out, and I don't want the people who are taking a little bit longer or learn differently to feel like they're not included either. And then there's the huge middle section. So that is one of the biggest balancing acts I find in the classroom. It's not easy. It's a juggling act,
right.
But that's the day-to-day of it.
How do you do that? How do you balance those? Because I can only imagine the different learning styles. I mean, even when you manage people, you've got people that are coming to work with different points of view, different backgrounds, and they're bringing that to the workplace too.
Well, the assignments are for everyone. So that is a uniform, that's one prompt or directive, whatever the assignment is. I think asking questions so that it speaks to each person as much as possible, so that they understand and feel that you see them, you hear them, and you understand whatever their challenge is. If they're not stimulated enough in the classroom, or they're way ahead, they have this knowledge already, or personal experience, or work experience. Many of our students work. That's another part of managing a successful classroom, is understanding their multiple obligations, and creating a conducive learning environment for everyone. So it's I think seeing each person as much as you can.
I think that makes sense, because obviously, it's not, the classroom isn't a classroom. It's these individual students, and they'll have all these different elements that they're bringing to the table here. So I want to go back to one of the tools or platforms you had mentioned with regard to AI. I think all folks, whether they're in education or not, are struggling with how to use this, what the impact is, how to do it responsibly. How are you going about teaching that or making people aware of
I appreciate the question. So perhaps 2 years ago when it came onto the scene, I was very eager to learn about it because I saw that the ship had already sailed, right? And we needed to deal with it. I had joined a couple of faculty learning communities, one of which I'm still taking part in. I'm grateful for the leaders on campus that are doing that. I am constantly assessing it as a tool, something that can be used to help us. And by the same token, I don't, carte blanche, let it do things for me.
Yeah.
And I talk with the students about it. I talk with them in the classroom about how it can be used. As we discuss a lot, we have calculators, we have autocomplete when we're typing, and Google tries to guess what it is we want to search. We do the AI is the large language models, that is, like ChatGPT and Claude, can be used similarly, but you wouldn't want it to replace the original thought and work that you're doing. So it's a tool, and it's not, of course, a static tool. We're continually learning, and it is improving just over the last 2 years.
How are you using it for yourself relative to teaching? Yeah.
I use it for checking my emails. So I write my emails, and then if it's not feeling right, I ask, or it feels clunky, I ask Claude or ChatGPT to clarify or simplify. So I'm still using my words, but it might suggest a few words instead of what I said, and to be less redundant.
That's the key, right? That is key. We had one of our guests in earlier. He's a fellow that teaches middle school, and he teaches media at a middle school here. And what was interesting with him is he mentioned that he's kind of obviously the teachers don't want it to replace the creativity or the work itself. So one of the things he lets have the kids do is, okay, if I'm giving them an assignment to interview, say, a teacher or somebody else for a story that they're doing, they can use ChatGPT or something like that to create a list of the questions they would ask. So, in the short time it takes them to do that, they can move on to something else, and then the questions are probably what they would have come along with. But that way they can get it out of the way and then move on to something else. Is that kind of what you're thinking relative to some of the, maybe not exact application?
That's one way to use it. And like you said, that's a way that they can dig deeper when they're doing the interview. So maybe those are the original questions, but you've got other questions where the students will be thinking on the fly. So absolutely.
Yeah. It's an interesting dynamic because I don't think we know where this is going. But hopefully, I think the thing you mentioned the word tool, and I think using it as a tool, and I think that's the thing that when we talk with other folks, and even as we're using it here at SECC, that's the way we look at it. It's not a replacement for a person or for even a process. It's just a tool to get us to something else faster. Yeah, I think that's true. That's a good point. So when you're dealing with the students and you're involved with the internship program at Sac State, how do you work with them in terms of identifying the internships, working with the employers who might have them on board as an intern? How does that work?
Great question, and I'm glad you asked because I love to talk about internships. So I work with the academic internships within our department, and I work in the communication studies department, and we have film, journalism, communication, and public relations majors. We receive internship positions through employers in any number of ways. Through the Career Center, people contact the Career Center. That's a first stop for many people. And they offer different types of internships as well. But if the employer is looking for a longer term, you want to have the student agreement for months or a semester at a time, then the coordinator will refer the employer, the potential site, to me. And I work with them to develop a position that fits one of our majors. And then we act as a hub where we set up the listings for our majors in the department. And students can get credit for them based on the hours that they work.
Okay. And then so are you actively seeking employers, or
Yes.
are they okay? Okay.
Any number of ways. So employers or potential internship sites come to us. I attend the Community Engagement Center networking cafe. So community organizations in Sacramento come there as a networking event, and I go there to meet people as well for potential sites. And I say that there's communication in any profession, and I am hard pressed to find one that doesn't involve.
I think that is definitely true. I think that's true. So, what constitutes a successful internship?
Right. So internships are a semester-long agreement, and aside from the employer and the student loved the position, sometimes a successful internship is learning that the job or the internship position is not what the student thought it was going to be. We heard that a lot with some internship sites. They thought it was going to be one thing and it wasn't. And I said, well, you did a great job for the internship host and you're off the hook, and so are they after 4 months. And I think that learning before you get yourself further down the road with the academic career and perhaps longer term job and quit, internship offers a useful, shorter, experiential learning opportunity for students.
It's kind of a test run.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you have students that go through an internship and decide, okay, this is not what I want to do. I'm going to change my entire mind and pursue something completely different?
It is a small minority, but yes, it happens sometimes. Ideally, students go through their internship, and if we're lucky, they are able to go on and work with the employer. We want students to know with internships that there are experiences with employers and organizations here in Sacramento that they don't necessarily need to leave. If they want to leave after they graduate, that's fine, but there's plenty happening in Sacramento that they have experience to draw from and opportunities here in town.
Sure. So can you give us an example of what some of the internships might be?
Sure. We work with the Sacramento Republic team. We have Black Women Authors, who is from Southern California, but they are a new host for interns. Totally on the...
That's okay. That's all right. What about any TV stations or any other media outlets or even communication departments at businesses?
I'm sorry, I'm totally blanking here, but I know this. So I don't have any broadcast stations list at the moment.
Yeah.
We also work with Gateway Community Charter School.
Okay, yeah.
And on campus, we have our Sacramento State Speech and Debate team. We work with the Hornet Athletics, and we work with the Office of the President, both in enrollment and external relations, to name a few.
Okay, that's great. And I can imagine it's pretty helpful for people. I mean, we had one of your students in here as an intern this past summer, and she was terrific and has since gone on to pursue a master's degree in film production now. So I can see the trajectory, at least with her, and how these internships help get people to that point.
Right, and I should mention SECC.
That's okay.
Internships.
Yep, thank you. Yep. And we hope to continue that, by the way. I want to go back a bit and talk about some of the research that you've been involved with and kind of what you've uncovered as a result of some of those projects.
So my research blends health communication and media. And over the last 10 years, I've focused in on alternative birthing options for women, and that is looking at midwives as birth healthcare providers and doulas. Mm-hmm. And most recently, I've tried to understand how people come to know about these birth healthcare providers and what their experience has been. So what I've learned is that people are familiar with midwives and feel very safe with doctors. Midwives and certified nurse midwives provide about 9% of births, they attend 9% of all births over the last several decades.
That's
in
pretty
the US.
Significant. Yeah.
And doulas are becoming more prominent because of coverage. They have been covered by Medi-Cal in increasing amounts over the last 10 years or so. With Obamacare, they have increased from 65% to 100% coverage. Pardon me, I need to scratch that. Let me start over with the care.
Go ahead.
Because I started blending nurse midwives and doulas. With doula care, they're becoming increasingly prominent because of insurance coverage. Several years ago, Medi-Cal began covering doula services, and just this year in 2025, some private insurers are covering doula healthcare services. And doulas are women who help women, providing emotional and informational support pre, during, and post childbirth.
So what's the more specific difference between them and a midwife?
Midwives are birth attendants. They can deliver babies. Doulas are support persons that do not, they provide information, whether it's emotional or informational support, such as, anyway.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So when you're talking about it from a media standpoint or a communication standpoint, what comes into account relative to these different elements?
One of my studies, I looked at content on websites, and I went to some of the more popular websites, birthing websites, as well as insurance websites, and less than 10% had information on certified nurse midwives and doulas.
Oh,
so there is a lack of coverage and a lack of information as for those types of providers as resources for birthing persons. There's plenty in terms of discussions. I could go on Reddit and find discussions and learn lots deep into those types of services. But as healthcare providers or paraprofessionals, it's not easy, has not been historically easy to learn about them. I am doing a study in spring 2026 to learn about women's experiences with doulas given the change in insurance in 2025.
So then how does a woman typically find out about any of this? I mean, other than a Google search, right? Because if the media's not really covering it to any great extent, I would imagine that's it.
It depends on the facility and the insurance. Kaiser, people tell me, introduce the expectant parents to midwives, and I look forward to hearing how they introduce them to doulas. Certain other facilities here in Sacramento introduce women to nurse midwives. But even within the healthcare organization, not all of them necessarily do. So it's inconsistent. Right. So unless one is interested and hears word of mouth, which is a lot of the way, a common way that people learn about these alternative birth healthcare providers, there's not a lot of easy access to the information.
So going back to your students, have you ever had students then recognize the research you're doing like this and say, okay, I want to be part of the solution?
I'm so glad you asked. My sabbatical study is indeed working with 2 graduate students from Sac State. They're currently grad students in the master's program at Communication Studies. They observed a previous study on this topic, and I invited them back this time as co-authors, so no longer observers, but they're going to work alongside me as a researcher. So absolutely, having student researchers as part of what I do in my research program is part of the learning process for students. By and large, they're master's students. Once in a while, I've had an undergrad student.
Sure.
So at any point, really, they can become involved in research.
Yeah, I think that's great. Because like you said, what a great opportunity for them, especially if they're in a graduate program and maybe they will go on to do their own research either in that area or something related. I want to go back then to the students and relative to some of the healthcare and media. Do you teach healthcare and media or the media coverage of healthcare?
So
Does
I
that get
teach
covered?
media
Yeah.
communication and I teach health communication.
Yeah.
They are separate classes.
Yeah.
Within each of those classes, though, in media I bring in health, and in health I bring in media.
Okay. So obviously there's a lot that's happened since the current administration came on board with regard to communicating elements related to all types of healthcare topics. Is that something you cover? And then how are you looking at that relative to how the students might be digesting this and how the general population might even be approaching the information?
Right. So I have done a couple of studies too on misinformation with a colleague in my department, and we find that social media is a big driver in how people trust misinformation. Depends on the source. In the health communication class, we break it into different sections, such as health campaigns, more passively collecting information from entertainment media, and then more active search and use of technology to monitor and improve your health. It boils down to becoming more of a critical consumer of media and boosting one's media literacy skills. So understanding to the best of your ability how to spot misinformation, especially with AI and certain images as well as voices, can be created, and learning to distinguish what might be truthful and what might be misinformation.
Yeah. So by the end of your media class, what do you hope students walk away with?
To be a more critical consumer, and it's an ongoing challenge to become a critical consumer and user of information from media.
Sure. So if you take that back, then these high school teachers that are trying to also do this similar with their students, even down to, let's say, middle school, even though there are kindergartners in the programs that we help support that are creating media, what advice would you give to teachers on how to work with their students to make them more critical media thinkers and consumers?
Not being an expert in the younger children and their development, I think getting them using relevant examples, asking them what they do in their day-to-day life and how they operate day-to-day. What are they using? What are they doing creatively on their own, sans media, apart from media? And then in what ways is media a tool? And that is, I think, the entry point to helping people to see all the information that you're getting might have bias built into it, or there could be avenues for bias. So I think building that awareness is one of the first steps to working with people on media literacy.
Are there tools in particular that you would recommend, or sites that teachers could go to help them with this? Because it's a big topic, and there might even be bias built into some of that.
One of the things that comes to mind is Pew Research Center. I use it a lot in my classes. As an unbiased, lesser biased source of data. And Pew Research Center provides summaries of studies as well as raw data. We use it for one class I teach is data analysis, and we go there as one source of raw data so that we can analyze it for our purposes. They talk about media, they talk about what people are doing, using, where they get media, where they get news and sports and entertainment and all of that. It does talk about media literacy as well, and people's knowledge or what they think they know. That might be one source.
That's a good idea.
Source.
Yeah, because it's unbiased as far as we all know. Because we've used that, and I used to be a marketing director at the ABC affiliate here, so I used to use that same kind of research, at least understanding what the audience wanted and how they were consuming media. When you look at some of this too, one of the things that's been interesting in a lot of these studies over the last few years that I've looked at, and others as well, is that people have tended to lose more and more trust in national media, especially traditional media, the cable channels, the network channels, big daily newspapers. but they still maintain a higher level of trust with local media. And I was wondering if you've looked at that at all and what you think what the reason might be.
We were looking at data just yesterday in our media class regarding news. The most popular answer in what people want in news is accurate, unbiased news. But the where to get it depends. If you want to break it down by age groups, older groups tend to trust local media and traditional corporate media. Younger groups, painting with a broad brush here, but tend to trust news aggregators. They look for wire services. They still look for traditional source credibility cues. New York Times, BBC, students have mentioned.
Yeah.
And they're also admittedly more passive consumers, which could be translated, I'm going on a limb here, but as less interest rather than sitting down in traditional time-oriented news where news comes on at television or radio at a particular time.
So that it's interesting about that with regard to the news aggregators, because that certainly is something that I've seen. But what's interesting to me also is that there are folks and influencers on TikTok that are being seen as news sources, even though they may not have any news background, which I'm not so sure anymore you have to have a news background. You just have to have, I think, the ability to maintain a level of curiosity and objectivity to some extent on what you're doing. But I was wondering, what you think of that, and if that's also a topic you're dealing with within your class.
Absolutely. We were just talking about this. There is a credibility assigned to citizen reporting, and the credibility goes to they're experiencing it, an event that's happening. Maybe it's a natural disaster, a protest, and they have nothing to gain other than to show people with their video and their footage and their commentary what it means to them, so others can see it and they can live it through the eyes of the person on the ground. That's not necessarily true. So TikTok is a great platform for people to share that information. There is also a need and a desire from across all age groups for trained journalists. People want to know that there is the journalism standard where you strive to report unbiased news, get different accounts and different sides of the story, and present it as an unbiased. That being said, there is still that wariness of some of the larger corporations leaning into bias. People see it, they feel it, and are looking for other ways to get their news.
Right. So do you address that idea of bias with your students? How do you approach that, and how do you get them to recognize that in themselves when they might be writing on a project or doing something related?
We talk about that in terms of selectivity. That is, we prefer, as individuals, we prefer things that match our own opinions. Looks like us, talks like us. We there's this natural liking or proclivity, I should say. At the same time, there's a slippery slope with the echo chambers that go on, and students recognize that. So that awareness, that knowledge, and also understanding the effort and discomfort it takes to listen to the other side. So in other words, they know they're more fill in the blank, this side or that side, and how uncomfortable it can be. Even like they go to their parents or their grandparents or a family member and the TV is blaring. They use that as an example a lot. And they do hear it, maybe in the background as ambient noise, but it takes work to go outside of one's comfort zone, hear other people with opposite sides of the aisle and their opinion and viewpoint, and to respectfully disagree and try to engage and to incorporate that and move on and forward and think, where do I situate myself in that?
Sure.
So that I can be lesser biased.
Do you find First of all, what is the age group of the students that you typically teach? Age range, I should say.
It's a wide range.
Okay.
So typically I teach the juniors and seniors and the grad students. So early 20s, but then we have students all across the age spectrum.
Do you find that by the early 20s, their opinions are pretty baked and it's harder to change? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lots of, and that being said, lots of students who are eager to hear other people's opinions, but absolutely.
Yeah.
We've had 18 years of teaching.
So then what advice do you give high school teachers with regard to trying to get their students to refrain from that bias? And then what advice would you give them for preparing their students for a media education or media major? Those two questions there.
Great questions. Well, I'm very appreciative of all the effort they do in teaching high school students in the first place. One of the things that we try to do, and again, they're older by the time they come to college, so is role taking and putting people in another's shoes and seeing that play out. A lot of it comes with life experiences. It's never, conservative, liberal. There's a backstory to how one got to where they are. And that, I think, the backstory, the history, and it's not the individual because we live within the social structures. So it's the family unit, it's the cultural unit, maybe geographic, all of it.
Yeah, that's a really good point because even each individual is not a monolith. I mean, there's all these different levels that go into what makes you who you are. And, I think these students that are in high school, they're still forming opinions. Right? So they don't have all the answers. I think at that age I thought I did, but I didn't. And today I still realize I don't have many answers. Has the advice that you've given students changed over time since you first started teaching relative to their career or how they might be seeing themselves later on in life or how they even approach their education?
Sure. Yes. Whereas you might have been, when I started, in 2008 at Sac State, we might have been looking at job titles. Now it's what skills are needed because you could use it and the title could change depending on how the technology changes. So thinking much more skills-based, emphasizing experiential learning. I have become an advocate of that. I've seen it, the benefits, before I became involved with our internship program. Students, they feel more confident. They know what's out there in the internship positions, so they've seen firsthand. It builds their resume. So I think having one other thing is having a bigger perspective on what am I skilled to do rather than what career can I choose.
That's a good point.
Because it changes. That's been true for me over just how I got to academia, but we're going to change jobs a number of times over the course of our lifetime or working lifetime. And most people want to work right when they get out of college. So it's not what career, but what skills am I equipped to do, and this would be the best fit and it's available at this time.
I think that's a really good point. I just read where the percentage of unemployed right now, the highest growing percentage are college graduates, or people with college degrees. And it doesn't make up all the majority of it. It's just that's the highest percentage growth of the unemployed. I mean, this one person had applied to like 3,000 jobs and still unable to find anything. So what do you tell folks in terms of the current landscape of employment and how they can best prepare? I think the experiential is a certain part of it, but what else would you tell them relative to this current environment?
So when I heard you say the applied for thousands of positions, I too have my ear to the ground and hearing what people do. AI makes it really easy. Like if I were to use AI to apply for jobs, and yes, it's a full-time job just to look for a job, I can apply for thousands of jobs, and it sounds very depressing. So not to get discouraged. I think I would tell students that getting a job is not something you do after you graduate. You do it maybe far before you graduate, and it's laying that foundation, and it's making the connections with communicating with other people, and in addition to the experiential learning and however that comes about. Because as I said, many of our students already work when they come to Sac State, so it's leveraging their skills, they're growing, they're figuring things out for themselves, and also using to the best of their ability, their connections and their knowledge about seeking jobs, again, that work for them at that time. And maybe they need to expand what they're willing to look for. Like geographic move certainly opens up your available options.
I think that's true, because I think when you're just out of college, if you've already locked in, I'm only going to do this, I'm only going to live here, you just keep narrowing your options. And at the point when you're ready to graduate, if you haven't made yourself amenable to more options, you're basically going to be stuck filling out 3,000 applications, whether you use AI or not,
right,
and probably not having a lot of success.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So are there any topics here that I haven't covered, or anything that you want to address? Or okay.
This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, yes, it has. Okay, it has been a pleasure. So thank you, Carmen. I appreciate you being here and helping talk about this really incredible topic.
I'm delighted.
Yeah. All right. So, that ends our current episode of Lights, Camera, Learn. You can catch us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, and the secctv.org website. Or you can support us on Patreon by clicking on Lights, Camera, Learn, and find us there. Until then, make it a great day. Thank you.